Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is June 13th. On this day in 1977, three young Girl Scouts, Lori Lee Farmer, Michelle Heather Goose, and Doris Denise Milner, were found murdered at a summer camp in rural Oklahoma. Their deaths sent shockwaves across the country and shattered the sense of safety surrounding childhood, summer camps, and the Girl Scouts themselves. The case remains unsolved to this day and is clouded in controversy and decades of questions. Today, we're going to take a closer look into what has become known as the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders and the lingering mystery that still surrounds this horrific crime. Let's get started. Camp Scott was nestled on 410 acres near Locust Grove, Oklahoma. For nearly half a century, it had welcomed girls for summer sessions filled with hiking, crafts, swimming, and song. The camp was run by the Magic Empire Council and had long been seen as a place where girls could safely explore the outdoors and grow more independent. On June 12, 1977, more than 130 campers arrived to begin a new 2-week session. Among them were Lori Farmer, just 8 years old, the youngest camper there, 9-year-old Michelle Goose, a bright, curious girl from Broken Arrow, and 10-year-old Denise Milner, a thoughtful child who had been hesitant to attend but was encouraged by her mother to just give it a try. The girls were assigned to the Kiowa unit, one of the most remote areas of the camp. Their tent number 8, was positioned at the far end of the unit, farthest from the counselor's tent and partially hidden by trees. That evening, the campers had dinner, sang songs, and wrote letters home. In one of the last letters Denise wrote to her mom, she shared a simple but heartbreaking truth. Quote, "I don't want to stay at camp for 2 weeks. I want to come home," end quote. Later that night, as a thunderstorm rolled in, the girls zipped themselves into their sleeping bags while rain fell and lightning cracked above the woods. Just hours later, their lives would be taken in the dark. At around 6 a.m., a counselor heading toward the shower spotted what looked like 3 sleeping bags at the edge of a trail. Curious and concerned, she walked closer. That's when she made a horrifying discovery. Inside the sleeping bags were the lifeless bodies of Lori, Michelle, and Denise. 2 were nude, 1 was partially clothed. All had been sexually assaulted. Lori and Michelle had been bludgeoned to death, and Denise had been strangled, possibly after trying to escape. The campgrounds erupted into chaos. Law enforcement was called immediately, and an evacuation was ordered. But information was scarce. Parents were told that there had been an emergency, but many didn't know the full scope of it until they saw the news or showed up to pick up their daughters. The crime scene was horrendous. Blood was found inside tent number 8, and investigators discovered a flashlight with a lens that was partially covered by duct tape. 1 fingerprint was lifted from the lens, but it never matched anyone in existing databases. Investigators believe that the killer entered the tent during the storm, slashed open the canvas wall, murdered the girls, and then carried their bodies through the woods to where they were found, about 150 feet away. The case quickly ballooned into a massive investigation. It involved the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, local sheriffs, and the FBI. Before long, suspicion centered on one man, Gene Leroy Hart. Hart was a 33-year-old local who had previously escaped from the Mays County Jail and had been on the run for nearly 4 years. He had been serving time for kidnapping and raping 2 pregnant women in 1966. Hart grew up in the area and was familiar with the rugged terrain around Camp Scott. A search of the nearby woods turned up a cave with newspapers matching those used in the killer's flashlight, along with other suspicious items like duct tape, photographs, and eyeglass frames that were similar to a pair that had gone missing from the camp. Investigators saw this as a possible hideout for Hart and perhaps the killer's lair. In August 1977, Hart was arrested at a cabin deep in the Cookson Hills. But despite the circumstantial evidence, the case was far from airtight. At trial in 1979, Hart's defense team pointed to a lack of direct forensic evidence. There was no conclusive blood match, no fingerprint link, and no eyewitnesses. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some believed that Hart was a convenient suspect, while others were convinced that he was the murderer. The jury deliberated for just a few hours before finding Hart not guilty on all charges. He was acquitted, but because of his earlier prison escape, he wasn't free. Just 2 months later, Hart died of a heart attack while jogging in prison, where he was serving time for his earlier crimes. The verdict left many reeling. For the families of Lori, Michelle, and Denise, justice remained elusive. Hart's prior convictions and the physical evidence found near the camp seemed to paint a clear picture. But the holes in the case, especially the lack of forensic confirmation, couldn't be ignored. So was Hart truly the killer, or was the wrong man put on trial while the real killer remained free? For years, the case went cold, but the families of the victims continued to press for answers, even as time passed and physical evidence deteriorated. Then, in 2022, the OSBI announced a major development. Thanks to modern advancements in DNA testing, 3 separate semen samples from the original evidence had been retested. All 3 matched the same male profile, though the samples were too degraded to be entered into the FBI's CODIS database. Still, investigators stated that they believed, based on the totality of evidence, that Jean Leroy Hart had committed the murders. It was as close to closure as the families would get, but officially, the case remains unsolved. The Oklahoma Girl Scout murders devastated a generation. Camp Scott closed within months and has never reopened. For many, it marked the end of an era when parents felt safe sending their children off into the woods with strangers and a backpack. Lori Farmer, Michelle Goose, and Denise Milner never got to grow up and never came home from what was supposed to be a summer of fun. Their families have carried that loss every day since, honoring their daughters' memories in quiet, enduring ways. Books, documentaries, and podcasts have revisited the case over the decades, but the raw truth remains. 3 children were murdered in a place meant to nurture and protect them. And no one has ever been held legally accountable. But though their killer may have escaped conviction, their names, Lori, Michelle, and Denise, live on. Their story matters. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found today's story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!